somebody in that is essentially event adjacent, that is part of the event industry, but also maybe a little bit on the fray of it, where they're going to talk about specifically their creative process that we can glean some inspiration and ideas from. So first up, I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to today's session sponsor, Comcast and Comcast Rise, and we're going to let our sponsor here say a few words through this video.
Oh, we're not hearing the sound, Melissa.
All right, it sounds like we may have as usual, in life, right? The AV gods don't always work with us. We will go ahead and get a link over to you if you weren't able to hear that directly. But again, big shout out to Comcast. I wanted to say a few announcements before we get started. Again, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Melissa Jerkin. I'm the International President-elect. We have some very exciting upcoming engagements. First of all, we've got in the new year, cannot believe we're in December here and we're just approaching the last of 2023. We have a webinar coming up in January. And then we have opportunities for live get-togethers, which I am so excited for. We're partnering again with CaterSource in the special event taking place in Austin, Texas. We are presenting some educational sessions, but we're also going to have a meetup on none other than Valentine's Day. So it'll be lots of fun to spend the day of love with all of us from the event industry. And then, of course, with our new partnership with ADMEI, we'll be presenting some education sessions over at their conference coming up here in February, and another opportunity for a live meetup. So a lot of really great opportunities for engagement, and we cannot wait to see you there. All right, and now I get to introduce Patrick Braillard. So I'm gonna just talk a little bit about his very storied career. I have been super excited about this. It's absolutely fascinating at the scale and magnitude of what he does. So let me tell you a little bit about him. First of all, he is the senior show writer for Universal Creative. You might be wondering, hopefully you know Universal Studios. So I would assume that everybody has been there, but across Universal destinations and experiences, he is, that company is of course responsible for rides, attractions, parks, and resorts. He really does have a wealth of experience across the themed entertainment sphere. He's provided creative direction on the design and execution of hundreds of entertainment installations based on major intellectual properties, such as, I think you probably have heard this, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Jurassic World, and Netflix Stranger Things. One of his marquee events is Halloween Horror Nights, a sellout event over at Universal Orlando. He's executed hundreds of haunted attractions throughout the Horror Nights history across even Universal Studios Japan and Orlando, which is now in his 33rd year. Fun fact about Patrick, he is a faculty member at the University of Central Florida's Themed Experience graduate program. Oh, and on the side, somehow he found the time to be a co-creator of the horror comedy card game, Oh, the Horror. And now he is working feverishly on creating the first theme park to open in 20 years. A theme park has not opened in 20 years. He is working on Universal Epic Universe, which he's going to talk a little bit about. It is the 4th domestic theme park at Universal Orlando. Oh, and he's also recently been named a top 50 influencer in the theme park industry. I'm super excited. He is going to talk today about his creative process from start to finish and really how storytelling is at the heart of everything he does. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Braillard.
uh, I'm blushing with the accolades and with the amount of gushing that just happened. When you put it in perspective, after your career gets looked at a little bit, you kind of have to take a sit back, and that's a humbling venture. First, I would like to say thank you for having me and allowing me to be able to talk about a little bit about the creative process and to be able to share some things with you all today. Um, Melissa and I, you might not know this, but Melissa and I actually went to high school together. And following each other's careers was always engaging to me whenever she would talk about live events and whenever I had the opportunity to look at things like ILEA, because we are parallel in how we function and the things that we do inside of our own individual scopes. And so I'm thrilled to be here to be able to share some maybe some information, creative processes that we kind of go through, but also kind of my take on storytelling and where it places itself inside the world of live events. Because I don't believe that even if you are a mom and pop shop, or if you are one of the largest corporations on the planet, storytelling is key to what you do. I think that we as human beings are inherent storytellers, and I think that that gets looked not necessarily down upon, but I think that gets it places us in a certain position as creatives, and I think that it gives us an opportunity to be able to engage our guests, regardless of where we come in the process of meeting them. It allows us to engage our guests in unique ways that certainly help bridge the gap between what they would normally expect in their lives versus what they expect when they come to a live event, when they engage or they participate and buy in. And so we're going to be talking about a few of those things. Due to technical issues, I don't know whether or not you're going to be able to see any portions of my screen, but I'll be able to talk through some things and hopefully some tidbits. A little bit of housekeeping. I love answering questions. So if there are any questions you have at any point during the course of this, please put them in the chat and I will get to them if they come in many at a time or as they come in. I'm more than happy to answer questions about certain pieces of the events that I've worked on or individual pieces that that might spark some inspiration for you. However, I do have to preface that because I am currently working on Universal Epic Universe, I will not be able to disclose any information about a brand new theme park that's going to be opening up in 2025. It is the fourth domestic park that we've got for Universal Orlando Resort, and for Universal Destination and Experiences, it is the first park at the point that it will open up. It'll be the first park in 25 years domestically that a major theme park has opened up. And so we're very excited about that process and about bringing those materials to guests. So first, you probably got to be wondering, like, who is this guy? Well, I am originally from the Seattle, Washington area, and I went to Washington State University where I received my bachelor's in theater. And then I was a professional actor and director in the Seattle area until my wife and I moved down to Orlando in 2004, just in time for 4 major hurricanes. We landed here 2 weeks before that occurred, so that's super exciting. And then we worked in the Orlando theater industry and both in the parks, both at Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, and things like that, until I started working for the creative development team inside the entertainment division of Universal Orlando Resort. And at that point, I had the opportunity to join them as a show director in the creative development team. And the function of a show director in that team is kind of twofold. The first is that you get to work on capital projects. So if it's a certain dollar amount and it goes up, it's a permanent installation. You get the opportunity to work on those and develop those so that the guests have a full activation that is there permanently within the park. The other half of the job function is to do the marquee events, and marquee would be designated as any annual event that resurfaces and almost on a tradition basis that resurfaces annually and that the guests look forward to going to. And they are not necessarily hard ticket events, but they could manifest as hard ticket events, depending on what they are. And so those events would be something like the Mardi Gras parade or our Halloween activation, where we've got not only shows, but also a huge parade working in conjunction with Macy's. There's also summertime events, concert series, things like that. But the one that I was hired on to, and was really brought in the fold for, was Halloween Horror Nights. And I don't know, in the chat, if you let me know, I don't know how many people that are a part of this meeting have been to Halloween Horror Nights or know what Halloween Horror Nights is. But Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando began in 1991. It was known as Fright Nights then, and for the first couple of years. And it had, okay, Liz, yeah, you've never been, but it sounds fun. It is. It's a blast. It began for 3 nights, and it was one haunted house. And it was open up for 3 nights. It was not a hard ticketed event at that point. The second year, they started selling tickets for it. And it quickly grew so that, yes, as Melissa said, it's in its 33rd year. It now typically will have 10 haunted houses, 5 scare zones spread throughout the entirety of the park, and 2 massive live shows. So as you can see, the attraction itself grew from a single house holding a few characters to something that takes over the entirety of the park. When I first moved down here and had the opportunity to go to Horror Nights as a guest, and one of the reasons that I wanted to begin to work with the entertainment team in its activation of the event was because I saw the potential for what is a regular commonplace theme park, but then in the space of an hour, it flips over to a completely different park. The theming changes, the lighting changes, all of the audio changes, and the entire atmosphere of the park is transformed by everyone working on the event. The event starts very, very slowly, but then ramps up incredibly quickly. And by that, I mean, when I first started doing Horror Nights, we would start concepting the event around January. Now it's an 18 and January for that following fall. So roughly an 8 to 9 month process. Now it's almost twice that amount. Now the team begins about 18 months out from the beginning of the event, so much so that when we start doing press and media for the event, we are already thinking of it as the year before. It's already last year's event. And the process starts, I'm sure, much like many of your live events begin, as far as the concept is concerned. It's 4 or 5 people sitting around a table discussing what they want from that event's year and what they expect the at the very least the attractions that the guests are going to see. And on an annual basis, the process might start with that small group, but eventually it will take over the entirety of the property, and every single employee of Universal Orlando is in some way, shape, or form impacted by the event itself. The process is fun, but also incredibly challenging. So much so that, and Melissa hinted at it, the course that I teach at the University of Central Florida with the grad students in the themed experience track is really centered around storytelling as a theatrical art form through a lens of how best to collaborate with other people and how best for that storytelling to take form when you're dealing with real world consequences and the practicalities that are necessary in putting up an event of that magnitude. And it can translate to smaller events as well. I know that in the short time that Melissa and I were chatting about this webinar, she was talking about the fact that we have members in ILEA that range the entire spectrum of size, all the way down from boutique events all the way to the large corporation style week-long takeovers that might occur. But I think that the principles found in not only the collaboration that I found in my career, but also all of the different people that I've had an opportunity to talk with, I think they all find commonality in the idea that storytelling is truly the vehicle by which collaboration can exist. It truly is the vehicle by which people can talk to one another and really come to a sense of understanding about how to implement the event, but also how the guests or the participants or the convention goers or what the patrons or whatever moniker you want to place on those individuals that will be end up going through the experience, how they will experience it and what their takeaways are going to be. And I think that that is something that can't be overlooked and something that can't be understated in its importance. I think that it matters how you invest in, and I don't necessarily mean monetarily, although that certainly is part of it, how you invest in the storytelling elements that will eventually be the takeaways, the emotional takeaways of the audience as they are going through the event or how they are responding to it. We often have conversations in at Horror Nights, but also here at Universal Creative as we're building the new park. We often have conversations about, you know, the level of depth that we try to take our storytelling in how it's shown in the set design, or how it might be read in the audio, or how the entertainment, not just shows, but the entertainment characters that people meet and greet with over the course of their holiday or their vacation, how that how far should we take that storytelling depth? And there really is no bottom. And that's something that I think people have a hard time wrapping their head around, that there really is no bottom to the storytelling and the depth that you want to take it, primarily for a couple of different reasons. One is that people's imagination is unlimited. You can keep going as long as you want to, and obviously there's certain monetary things that you're going to want to rein the creatives in. Otherwise, they're creating just to create, and that serves no purpose because you want it to be pointed. But also, we as human beings, intellectually, when we go to something that we buy into, when we go to an event, or we go to a live event, or we go to a theater show, or we go to a theme park, or we go to a convention that's being hosted by a particular group, we take with us everything that we've experienced thus far. And we are pattern makers, so we automatically assign patterns to the interesting part about it is that you may intellectually, if the team has done a brilliant job of storytelling and going far enough to really want to make an impact on the guest, you as that guest intellectually might not know a difference. And that's it's a crazy thing to say, but you might intellectually not know how hard the team worked to create that many levels of storytelling, and we're that driven to dive that deep. But I guarantee you that as a human animal, you will feel the difference. You feel a difference when you walk into a location, and I'm not going to talk about competition or competitors, but if you go to an amusement park, if you go to a park that's purely built for flash and thrill rides and popcorn and midway games, and it's meant to provide that escape for you, and those are wonderful places to go. I'm not going to poo-poo those things, but when you go there versus when you go to a major theme park who is actively pushing the bounds of what storytelling means and immersive qualities mean to a guest who has bought in, not only with their money, because we are a for-profit company, but also with their time and their energy, and you see, those guests will feel a massive difference in how care was taken in developing the sets, in producing the audio, the video effects. It's not just enough to say that it's state of the art. It's not just enough to say oh, well, that theme park really spent a lot of money to be able to craft that that spectacle. I firmly believe that those things will eventually, those things will eventually be shown, and they all have their place. But it's when you take the time to care about the theme and take care to think about the storytelling and the look at it from the guest point of view and how they experience or how they will interpret the things that are happening for them, that really make the difference. I just went on a huge soapbox and a huge diatribe for many minutes. So if you're asleep, I apologize. But if you have any questions on that before we move on, I would love to hear them. And then I can talk a little bit about the process of how we develop the live event on that scale. Any questions? No? Okay.
Not seeing any right now, Patrick.
That's okay. That's great. I've answered all of them. That's great. No, I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the other half. I've touched on Marquee a little bit with Hornites, and I'll go back to that in a minute. But I did want to talk about the I don't know how much opportunity the participants have in ILEA to work on a massive scale and deal with intellectual properties, because I think that there's a misunderstanding out there that working with intellectual properties in the execution of a live event and working with intellectual properties in the execution of something for the guests automatically means that your hands become tied to that intellectual property and that it's inflexible. We have done dozens. I have done dozens of intellectual properties. There we go. There's Epic Universe. The intellectual properties that we're using in this particular park, I can't necessarily speak on, but I will say that having the opportunity to work with partners at Jurassic, working with partners at Netflix for Stranger Things, working with Warner Brothers and the Blair Partnership for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, are incredibly rewarding. And I think that when you have the opportunity to work with an intellectual property, their goal and your goal need not be confrontational as far as the payoff is concerned. They are just looking to make sure that their intellectual property, the thing that they own or the thing that belongs to them, are paid off in a way that is full and fulfilling for their guests and the people and the fans that have taken the time to invest in their brand. And we had the opportunity during Halloween Horror Nights to not only create original mazes, but also work with intellectual properties. And the goal was always to take the intellectual property as we found it, dive in and find the unique places inside their own IP, and really kind of push the sides of the sandbox out, if you had to think about it in a kind of an esoteric way, to be able to dive into the intellectual property and find out the things that the fans really wanted to see. And I am a huge proponent of if you have the opportunity and you're working with IP, I think it's best to try and become a fan of that intellectual property, to try and dive in and really immerse yourself in what makes that IP tick, because then you're going to automatically, in the execution of those events that you have for that IP, you're going to automatically be able to answer creative problem-solving questions just because you might be able to help anticipate the intellectual property holder's reaction to certain things being done on their behalf. I know that when we were working with Netflix and Stranger Things, we had a lead time, a very short amount of lead time, before the event was going to happen, and they were still filming the episodes. And so we had no choice but to really dive in as fans and figure out exactly how best to pay off their intellectual property and try and figure out how they would react to it previous to us being able to build the house out. There's something right there. I think that it's never an easy feat, but I think that if you really do take the time and invest the time in diving in as a fan itself, it certainly does help. I think that who takes the lead in those partnerships? Who has the final say? That's a great question. Okay, so it's funny because that's a hard question to answer and a very easy question to answer. The easy part is there is an entire team that handles IP relations, and that's a wonderful thing that they do. However, when the rubber meets the road, it's still going to be the creatives walking those intellectual property holders through the houses or through the scare zones or talking them through the decks or presenting in pitch decks all of the different things that they're going to see. And so we rely upon our IP relation holders to help set the table and make sure that they are there so that all of the communication that is moving back and forth stays coordinated in a way that neither party is waiting for answers, but also we know that we are listening to one another. In relation to who has the final say, that's going to be dependent on the intellectual property. There are some intellectual properties out there that almost give carte blanche to the creative teams that work with them. And they say, okay, we know you understand this, go forward with whatever you have, and just show us the final product. And then there are other intellectual properties that are heavily invested in every single aspect of what you want to show, to the point where you're showing them, you're coordinating on paint chips, and you're coordinating on whether or not certain words get left in the scripting. Certain intellectual properties really want buy-off on the casting of people that might be participating in the live event to help showcase their characters. And so it really, that's a huge amount of negotiation that has to happen, not only with the intellectual property relations teams, but also with the creatives, and being able to gain the trust of those IPs so that when you work with them a second time, they understand the game a little bit better, and they understand that maybe they can loosen up a little bit as far as being able to trust you. And that really has everything to do with the collaborative spirit that you come at them. I can't say enough how storytelling and being able to invest in how important that intellectual property is to those holders has allowed us to be able to expand that sandbox and be able to take the intellectual properties to places where at first they might not have seen them. Certainly, there are no roller coasters in Jurassic Park as far as the intellectual property is concerned. That intellectual property bases itself on a theme park that's taken over by dinosaurs. That's the main attraction. And so our intellectual property holders and our creatives, or our intellectual property relations and our creatives, had to go to even our own company at Universal to be able to get something like Velocicoaster, which is a massive roller coaster that we have at Universal Orlando, and be able to pay that off story-wise in how it interacts with that particular brand. I can tell you that I was extremely fortunate to be a part of the entertainment team and build out the entertainment slate for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and Diagon Alley. And I can tell you also that Warner Brothers is one of the most fastidious intellectual property holders out there, and for good reason, because that brand is so well loved across the entire planet that you want to go out of your way
to make sure that you are IP adherent. You want to go out of your way to make sure that the guests feel as if they are truly stepping into Diagon Alley. And I could not give enough credit to not only Warner Brothers but the Blair partnership in the collaborative spirit at which they approach that project, and all of the people here at Universal that were able to pay it off. I'm humbled to be a part of that project, because that's one of those generational projects that don't come around very often, and when you have the opportunity to pay off that large of a fictional world for guests, it really is something to behold. Has anybody here in the chat been to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter? Answer question. Has anybody been here to the Wizarding World? Yes. Okay, great. So here's an interesting tidbit of information, and it's something that I touched on a little bit earlier when I was talking about the fact that the guests might not intellectually know the difference between the depth of storytelling, but they'll feel a difference. I have been and I love the butterbeer. Yeah, everybody loves the butterbeer. It now comes in several different styles. There's now frozen, hot, ice cream, regular butterbeer, and I think there's one more that I might be forgetting, but there's several different. Yeah, you have to visit again. So I have been inside that land hundreds, if not thousands of times, on an official capacity or just as a guest. And there was one day that I was walking through, and for those of you who have never been there, there is we have Gringotts Bank at the end of the street, at the end of the high street in Diagon Alley. And perched atop Gringotts Bank, if you're a fan of the movies, is the large dragon that has broken out of the bank itself and is perched on top, looking down at the guests. And every few minutes, that dragon will blow an enormous fireball out of its mouth, and all the guests stand there for minutes on end, waiting with their phones, waiting to take a picture of that giant fireball. And it's something it's really impressive. But I was having a conversation with one of the designers of the land, and I said, my favorite part, I didn't realize that my favorite part of the land, and a land that I've worked in and I've created for and I've done everything with. I said, my favorite part of the land, I didn't even realize was my favorite until about a year after it opened. And he said, what's that? And I said, around the neck of the dragon, as the dragon's there, it's a static figure, but around the neck of the dragon, there's a chain that is broken free and is dragged up to the top. And that chain is blowing in the wind. It's a live chain that if wind hits it, it just kind of moves in the wind, giving that dragon just a little bit more life. And he laughed and he said, that's really funny. We got into a huge argument about that chain and making sure that we wanted it to be free flowing so that the guests felt as if that dragon could leap off that building at any moment. And that, even if I've worked in parks for 20 years, was revelatory to me, because it meant that others were also taking a look at and also making sure that their storytelling went deep, and it was on a chain. It was on something as small as a couple of links of metal hanging 7 stories above people's heads, and they didn't have to make it free flowing, but they wanted to because it was going to add just a little tiny touch of realism. And that's something that touched me. So let's see. Melissa had a question. You mentioned that every spoken word or sign is crafted through you and your department so as to marry up with the overall story, that you're sort of the steward to ensure that everything you see and do and hear in the park is part of the overarching story. Can you talk more about that? Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I'm doing right now, the job that I've been tasked with is I am the senior show writer here at Universal Creative for the project, which is Universal Epic Universe. And myself and I'm the senior show writer, and I've got a show writer that's with me on my team. The two of us are the stewards for every word that will be spoken by anybody in this park. Also on-stage signage, as well as any of the projects and parts of the larger project as smaller projects that are a part of it. And every single one of those teams filters their words through our team to make sure that we keep a global perspective of the story as it's being told for the guests from the moment that they come out of their car to the moment that they leave. And that is something that is absolutely amazing to be a part of. But it also means that we have to constantly keep our I mean, it gives us an opportunity to dive into all of the stories that are being told from all of the vendors, but it also gives us an opportunity to kind of watchdog and make sure that there's a variety for the guests so that their experience is varied through the course of their day, and that we're not having multiple shows that are going to be doing the same thing, or multiple guest experiences that will be doing the same thing, or activations. And it is an extremely difficult task, but it's one that I feel like we're uniquely suited to do because we're storytellers first. We always want to make sure that the stories that are being told are the thing that we keep coming back to. In fact, I've told groups this before, that when I'm in a meeting, if I begin speaking, I would like them to put the words, well, narratively speaking, and then my thought, because that's where my wheelhouse is. I'm speaking about the story as it relates to the entire park, and also to the guest experience. So making sure that that story is told is paramount. Let's see. Sarah said, "How do you keep track of all what has been approved, and where it is stored for reference? Seems like a lot to keep your arms wrapped around." Okay, it's not just me. Each project has sets of coordinators as well as producers whose entire job is to manage the intellectual property pieces as they come in and as they are approved. There are designers that are working to design not only architecturally, but also to design on an engineering level for attractions, and also for signage, and for the food and beverage team is busy designing all of the beverages, and there are test kitchens that are firing up right now, dictating what the food is going to be, and it takes thousands of people to create. Narratively, I am tasked with making sure that everything is cohesive across the board, and it is a lot to deal with all of the intellectual property holders that are pushing back and forth all of the different approvals. But also on their end, they've got entire teams of people that are dealing with our team. So it's and specialized, broken out, that there isn't just one reviewer and one person who's responsible for archiving all of those approvals. There are entire teams that are responsible for doing that. But yeah, all of the processes of making sure that things are cohesive and consistent across the board do fall to my team. How do you navigate the process of going from open creativity to logistical implementation? From what we could do, dream big, very open to how we pull off what we could do, reality of time, costs, and resources. Oh man, isn't this the crux? Thank you for Emma. That's a great question. There's no silver bullet to the answer, unfortunately. Every process is going to be different based on how each intellectual property wants their intellectual property implemented, and how best to go about that collaborative process to make sure that they're happy. There are, much like in any business, there are budgetary constraints that we know we have to hit, and so it will start very blue sky. It'll start at 30,000 feet when we go into concept. There'll be things that we know we want to do, and there are things that for us may end up sitting on a shelf and in research and development for years before we're able to pay it off. And once we have our kind of blue sky ideas in relation to Halloween Horror Nights, then the production team will throw ROMs. They'll throw rough order of magnitude at it and try to figure out those ROMs will dictate, okay, this is what budgetarily we think we're going to be able to spend on it based on what the budget of the event happens to be. And that's always going to kind of be this solid bucket of money that we know we have at our disposal, but it very quickly gets eaten up by all of the different pieces and parts, leaving us really the challenge becomes the creative problem solving, and how do we advance the event and make it new every single year, with also being attentive to that budget and the time constraints. Because we know that when it hits September 3rd, those doors are going to open and paying guests are going to be walking through. And so the calendar isn't going to get any longer, and the budget isn't going to get any bigger. So we have that is the crux, that you have to really find unique ways of being able to pay off that creative within the constraints of that budget. And how do you best go from that creativity to logistical implementation? Practice. I hate to, it sounds like a cop out, but it really is about doing it and trial and error. In something like Halloween, you've got 30 plus years of not necessarily formulaic patterning, but you do have a way of being able to go through that process, and innovation takes time over the course of those years to be able to make it so that by the time you look at the event 5 years down the road, it is completely different. Melissa asked a question of, have I pitched an idea that didn't work initially but came to fruition later, as in even years later? Yes, in fact, there is a designer at Universal who had been working on a concept. It's a great question. He'd been working on a concept for a house at Halloween Horror Nights, and it took him 8 years to get it through concept. Every year he would bring it to the table and say, okay, I know you've heard it before, but this is what I want to do. And everybody would kind of groan and go, okay, pitch us again. And then he would pitch it. And eventually, over the course of, maybe the first 3 years, I was part of that groaning party. I was like, oh man, not again. And then I started to kind of become a champion for it and go, no, we need to figure this out. We need to keep refining it. We need to keep reworking it. We need to make sure that it finally finds its feet. And then eventually last year, I can't tell you what house it was, but last year he finally got his house. And I was so happy for him, because it meant that, you do find a way to be able to figure out how best to, to Emma's point, logistically implement those things that might seem a bit extreme or a bit much at the time, but eventually they will find their way to light. What strategies do you have to consistently generate fresh and innovative ideas for new experiences in theme parks, keep visitors excited and engaged every time they come back? Wow, that's a really great question. Well, the wonderful part about it is I don't have to do it alone. I am one of thousands of people that are working for the park to help the guests engage differently every single time they arrive. But I will say that one of the tactics that we used, and one of the things that aided us, and it goes back to the collaborative nature of it, is something that I think points to a little bit about kind of the world as we find it right now. We were doing, my friend David and I, who is one of he's the scenic manager for Universal for Horror Nights. David and I were doing a special event for a group of middle schoolers, and we were trying to get across the point of collaboration. And this, in simplest terms, if David wants red and I want blue, you have to find commonalities amongst both of those that you can agree on, even if it's small, so that eventually your end result is purple. And we constantly are in a state of trying to find the purple. And it's very difficult to find those things if you don't automatically remember that as human beings, we are all storytellers and all want what's best for those guests. We just have different ways of going about achieving it. And so to gain fresh and innovative ideas, I think you have to be willing to be able to say yes to things that might make you uncomfortable, to things that you might not wholly agree on. You might have to say, yes, that's okay, I understand the idea, and I might not agree with the idea, but what are the nuggets or what are the kernels of things that I have never thought about implementing in my own process before? that I can then take and implement in my process? How do I best learn from things that I might disagree with, or things that I might not fully embrace, in order for us to be able to create something that's new? Plus, I'm a huge fan of television and film and theater, and I love social media. Like I find so many neat and interesting things that will spark those innovative ideas, I think, coming from that source material. So also diving into that and investing in going and seeing new things that you might not be necessarily interested in, but you go to so that you can learn a little bit more about the world to be able to get that. I draw inspiration from all sorts of different corners of media, and I often will try to go to live events that aren't my cup of tea, because I think that's where when we get uncomfortable, that's where we learn the best. When you're not necessarily excited about going, but you go because there might be something there that's been undiscovered so far in your process. Let's see here. Oh, the dreaded AI question. Okay, as a writer, those little plagiarist machines, I think they do serve a purpose. In all seriousness, I think that AI is wonderful at helping people form thoughts. I think it helps codify and get people started on the process to creativity. I do believe that as a tool, they are part of our future. I think that much like any leap forward, as far as I place it on the same level of leap forward as I place the internet, or I place television before it, or the written word before that. I think that there are going to be things that artificial intelligence is going to be able to do that is going to enable us to do so much as a society. And as storytellers, it enables us to be able to frame our thoughts and give us launching pads. But I do think, and our overlords in the future may have a problem with me saying this, I do feel that there is nothing that is ever going to replace humans in storytelling capacities, because AI can have all the data that it wants, but it doesn't know what a wheat field smells like at sunrise in March. And that's something that it can't do. It can tell you what chemical composition might be the air is, but it can't tell you how inspired we are when we look at the faces of our children, or we look at something that we've never seen before, or we watch something that makes us belly laugh. And I think that while it is an interesting tool, it is certainly a tool that will be used in the future ad nauseum from here on out. I think that we will always, hopefully, keep our perspective in its place as a tool. I don't know if there's any other questions. I know we're running up against time, and I want to make sure that I've got time for anybody to ask any more questions. Is there anything on the horizon, or that you are thinking to, about connecting the guests in the park through tech? Yes. I can't speak of the things that I know are on the horizon. I think that the sky, it's, it sounds cliche to say, but I think that the sky truly is the limit as far as our interactions with technology and how it best shapes our immersive experiences moving forward. I think that there are things that are going to be passive that you won't even know exist, that help shape your experience and just make your experiences easier to get a hold of. But it will always depend on the buy-in from your participants, or your patrons, or your guests, or whomever it is that is going through this immersive experience or these live events. It's always going to take the buy-in of those guests on an emotional level. And if they do that, then regardless of the implement that you use, whether it's traditional storytelling, music, dance, lighting, audio, video, any technological implement that you may have, regardless of how you engage on them, those are only tools to this story that is being told to them. And I think that you're going to see that there are very passive things that are going to enable that, and then there's going to be things that are going to be very much big wow moments that'll be a part of the guest experience, whether that is gamification, whether that is and whether that's AR, whether that's VR, whether that's holographic. I don't know, but there are a lot of different technological advances that are going to be coming out very quickly that will enable the guests to experience things in completely new ways. And that's really exciting to me as well.
Patrick,
And
that was an awesome answer and a few little tidbits there. I know there's one last question I have that I'm dying to know. Since you have been in the parks, right? Hundreds of thousands of times you live in the park. What is single-handedly your favorite ride?
My favorite ride no longer exists at Universal Orlando. And it was kind of my favorite ride experience ever. In 2013 I went to Universal Studios Japan to help them with Horror Nights for about a month and a half, 2 months. I was in town in Osaka. And during that time, I rode their version of the Jaws ride.
Oh.
Now, the Jaws ride at Universal Hollywood is very truncated. It's part of the studio tour. The ride at Universal Orlando was much bigger. You actually went on a full boat tour, and it was an entirely enclosed, encapsulated attraction. And Universal Studios Japan has that ride. I didn't understand a single word that individual said during the entirety of the ride. They've got an entire spiel, and they're yelling, and they're screaming, and they're engaging the guests. But at the end of the ride, I had the exact same feeling of triumph because they were such wonderful storytellers. I didn't need the language to understand that we had just beaten the shark, and everybody's going home, and everybody made it, and everybody's great. And that was something that really inspired me in knowing that language is always going to be a barrier when you've got guests coming from other places.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're true to the story, they'll pick up on it. Human beings are inevitably, they are inherent storytellers, and they want to be able to dive into those stories. And so language really does get transcended in those particular moments. And so that was my favorite ride ever.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm going to round this out. It is really neat to see, I know you from back in the day. Well, it wasn't that long ago. I won't get into how many decades ago it was. But that you started really in theater and immersed in theater, and what you've been able to grow this into and accomplish, the sheer magnitude, that's really what sticks out to me. We may do this every day, and we have events that range from 10 people to hundreds of thousands of people when you look at maybe an NFL game or whatnot. But to do this every single day and at the sheer magnitude, building a theme park and crafting every single word, and to hear your story of I think it was your dragon, and what was blowing in the wind, and just the minute detail, which I think this group really appreciates, because we believe that is crafting an environment, and everything we say, hear, touch, smell is part of crafting that. So I think I have gleaned so much from this. It's absolutely fascinating to hear what you're doing, and I'm frankly in awe. And it's very inspiring about what you're doing at Universal Creative. I took a lot of tidbits. One of them I'm going to start using is to find the purple. That really resonated with me, and to be really uncomfortable and say yes. I think so much of it is, I loved how you said, learn from things I disagree with or things I might not embrace. Because so much of it is really, we have maybe we think, we know innately or whatnot, but really where we can grow and evolve is by going, I'm going to listen to this, I'm going to go with this. and collaborate and see where it takes us. That's how we evolve. So those are just some of the things that I took from it. I know there are many learnings. We're so grateful that you took time out of your day to join us. And wow, I know you don't have the exact date, but it's 2025 that we've got Universal Epic opening. Am I right?
That's true, 2025.
So, I think maybe an ILEA meeting there. And I'll just start planting that seed. We can have a little behind the scenes tour or not. I don't know, anybody in the chat, if you're up for that, let's rally Patrick for it. And then I'm just going to close out. If you aren't a member of ILEA, I'll give you a few quick tidbits here. Maybe not. The tech managed by me today is questionable, but we've got amazing members that are tech savvy, and we're going to help have them help us here as we go forward. But many different avenues that you can join and plug into ILEA. Here's just a quick slide. If you need more information, I'll give you a few minutes to grab that QR code. And other than that, again, thank you to Patrick for joining us. Thanks everyone again for joining us on this Wednesday in December and during the holiday season, no less. I know this is a crazy time for us, but great information that we have going forward that we can take into the new year. So thank you
Thanks
again.
so much, everybody.
And take care all. Bye all.
Bye.